Hello, guys and gals, me Mudahar, and boy, Microslop keeps slopping. Now, you might be like, whoa, what happened this time, Muda? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've come across something that is frankly one of the most alarmingly stupid things that I've seen. But here is Copilot Health. Now, you know that little tool we like on the old Windows installation, the thing we can't get rid of, AI connected, internet connected, Clippy. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it seems like Copilot, Microsoft's kind of like billing sort of like new avenues for this to go down. Now, you know, ladies and gentlemen, before we kind of jump into this, I want to basically stress and say, I don't think it's a smart thing to give up your health information, your private medical information, to a data farming company like Microslop, to a company like even anything else, okay, OpenAI, Anthropic, anything that exists out there, okay? I don't think you should be uploading your shit to platforms like this, because to be honest with you, no matter what these companies say, I don't necessarily trust they're not using the information you provide them to A, train their stuff, to possibly share it with, anything other than themselves, and maybe, just maybe have that routed in the back end. A lot of these companies say they won't do this, but ultimately, can you trust them? I don't think you can. So even though companies like ChatGPT will say your health information is deeply personal, that's why it's a dedicated space with added protections for your sensitive information. And of course, what they said over here is that ChatGPT is going to be protecting your stuff too. They're going to give you meaningful control. Everything is encrypted by default and in transit as part of our core security architecture. So again, it's great that they say this, but ultimately there really isn't any way for you to verify this for yourself. Again, you just have to sort of trust these companies at their word. But anyways, I feel like it's fun to go back to Microslop over here because frankly, shitting on them makes me happy. So anyways, basically they're saying that, hey, ladies and gentlemen, are you tired of sitting in those clinic waiting rooms? Do you want to have extra questions that you can ask? That's what Copilot Health is for. So again, all these guys say it's a separate, secure space where medical intelligence makes sense of your information and delivers personalized health insights. You know, a lot of people have said that AI has this problem with hallucinations, and even the best artificial intelligence, usually you have to kind of prod at it a little bit just so it like corrects itself. A lot of these are also self-validating platforms as well too, and at the end of the day, they're large language models. They're fucking LLMs, brother. They're not sentient thinking beings. They're probability engines that I feel like I have this conversation every fucking time and nobody gets it. Anyways, Copilot Health doesn't replace your doctor. Thank Lord for that, okay? I really hope this isn't more of a legal thing. This is actually good advice. It makes every minute you have with them count more. You arrive prepared with the right questions, the right context, and the confidence that comes from better understanding your own body. So basically, it brings together your health records, okay, wearable data, and all that history into one place. Then it applies intelligence to turn them into a coherent story, where the connection between your broken sleep and the reason why becomes visible. Now, again, I don't know how much trust I would put into something like Copilot Health. Medical stuff is very, very fucking complicated. To give you an idea, a few years ago, I actually almost died, okay? For anybody that's new coming to the channel, I had this situation where my appendix blew up inside me. Now, for a few days, I actually had a pretty severe fever. I had actually went to I was actually up at like 97 or whatever 98 was, and then I would drop, and then I would rise, and then I would drop, and then I would rise, and then I would drop. Now, I didn't know what the fuck was going on at the time. I really did think that I had like some crazy flu, and I was just gonna sleep it off. Now, until I ended up calling my dad, who is an actual doctor, and I told him, Dad, I don't know what the fuck's happening. My fever keeps going up and it keeps going down. And my dad's like, son, get up and walk around a little bit. And then as soon as I started doing it and he heard me like actually vomiting, like actually like, bleh, 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 he was like, son, have you considered going to the fucking emergency room? So at that point, I went to the emergency room, and then a doctor came and drew like 5 different fucking blood vials off of me. They checked me for things like fucking mono. They still couldn't figure it out. Until, of course, I waited another day, and then they actually gave me an ultrasound, and I found right there and then that my guts were actually inverted, okay? So at that point in time, eventually, the doctors figured out that I had a perforated appendix when they put me into a fucking CAT scan. Basically where they put you down, they take off your pants a little bit, okay? They stick a needle inside you, it like sends tracer material, and then they use a computer to actually analyze what the fuck is in your body. And only then did they figure out that I had a perforated appendix. Apparently I was supposed to be in like actual like fucking seething pain because of this, but I wasn't in any pain. I guess I was able to tank that shit while an entire Rainbow Six Siege match was happening in my fucking body. So at that point, they basically penned me for an emergency surgery. If I was basically a day or two late, I would have actually went into sepsis shock and just died. And yeah, it was scary. You know, at that point, I started taking like health seriously. Normally, I'd be like, why would I even waste my time going to a doc? It seems like it's just a no. Now, mind you, the reason for the story is that I went through 2 days of examinations, all right, by actual proper medical professionals, okay, people that poked and prodded, drew blood out of me, okay, it felt like hell. But after all those tests, they were able to come up with something. Now, again, if I had this discussion with, you know, a fucking LLM, I don't think the LLM could actually answer the question appropriately. I don't know if it can do what my dad did, which was get up, walk around. And my dad was trying to listen for like something that would like, you know, spark. My dad actually had a disagreement with the doctors over there too, which I guess doctors do tend to have. They all have their own opinions. But ultimately, it was medical professionals that diagnosed me and were able to save my fucking life. Now, what I imagine a lot of people that are using shit like Copilot Health probably aren't in that space. They're probably, you know, a lot of these people just share their medical information and just basically ask for some benign things. But even then, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's not safe. I don't think this is a good idea. I think this is Microslop and many other AI companies looking for a way to sell this shit product into something that could actually be, you know, tangible over here. So again, they talk about things like medical superintelligence, which basically uses incredibly sophisticated artificial intelligence to make sense of patterns in your data. So initiatives such as Microsoft AI's Diagnostic Orchestrator have already demonstrated impressive results in research environments. Forthcoming publications will outline how their systems can be applied. This work paves the way to providing users with trusted access to medical superintelligence. Now, I love the term superintelligence because a lot of these AI companies are pushing terms like AGI, and in some cases, beyond AGI is like ASI. Effectively, this is when artificial intelligence gets so good at reasoning and thinking and modeling that it absolutely outpaces human beings in every regard. Right now, we're not even close to that. A lot of these companies have said for years now that we're going to be at AGI, but again, with models actually still hallucinating pretty rapidly still to this day, do you honestly trust AI with your medical information? And of course, the answer to that should be no. Even these companies will say, please, see a doctor. And that is true, right? It's like, you don't go to the fucking AI company to do your legal stuff for you. Because guess what, guys? Being a lawyer involves understanding very complicated sets of laws and how they intertwine with each other. Something that artificial intelligence can do a really good job of bullshitting, but can never actually reach. It's like asking AI to do your fucking taxes for you. Brother, you are just begging to be audited. Not that an audit is actually even scary if you have an accountant and have done your job right. But of course, when you get an LLM basically spitting out what it thinks is right, that's an issue, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, for things like medicine, I can't imagine putting the lives of somebody in a fucking LLM engine. It almost feels similar to like what's happening in like war right now. Like for anybody that doesn't know, this is something that I'll probably cover in the next few days. But in Iran, there was like an actual like school blown up of like little children. And it turns out that the Pentagon has been investigating this. And it might come out that maybe this happened because of old data that was thrown into Palantir and then cross-analyzed with things like Claude's like AI. And basically some, you know, AI tool that was used to absolutely analyze this battlefield situation caused a bunch of innocent children to die, because I guess no human being was there to verify. They just listened to the artificial intelligence and the AI hallucinated. Except in this case, you really can't backspace and like walk away from, death in this case. But that's nor here nor there. Microslop's like health shit is basically something that I've seen on par with many of these other tech companies out there. And again, a lot of it is trying to sell something to people that it's trying to make this AI shit more what is the word for it? More valuable than it actually really is. I think there's good stuff for artificial intelligence out there. I think some LLM stuff can be pretty cool, but for the most part, it was fine when people were just vibe coding like shitty programs and whatnot. But even then, from a cybersecurity perspective, there are so many people creating, creating code, writing programs, and pushing it out into the public world, and people are using this code that basically exposes them to serious security-like issues, right? Because artificial intelligence code is not designed in the best possible way, especially when you don't have a human being that can understand what code does to actually fix its various problems. Now, of course, extrapolate that to something beyond just writing computer code, fucking dealing with human lives. That, I think, it's not only a recipe for disaster, but I think from a privacy and security standpoint, conditioning the average person to be willing to give up their medical records, no matter how safe these companies say, which, let's be real here, none of these companies actually care about your privacy or safety or security. They're also intertwined with the mass surveillance engine anyways. Do you feel comfortable giving up your private personal medical records? And God knows what happens with that on their end of the service. Remember, these are tech companies. They can change their terms of service at any fucking time that they want, man. I mean, you shouldn't be doing this. So, of course, further down when you go over here, what they do talk about is how people are using Copilot. And a lot of it does come from individuals who ask for basic health tips, right? I mean, that does actually happen. People do ask for tips. People are treating a lot of these LLMs kind of like their search engines because guess what? Modern search engines suck ass. Some people go from health tips all the way to shit like, how do I survive Valentine's Day? And of course, the artificial intelligence is not designed for thinking and rational reasoning. Even though that there are reasoning models, don't get me wrong, these are still, again, just large language models. They're trained to find patterns and connections and string together what is coherent text. But they're not actually sentient, okay? Like a fucking doctor is, like a lawyer is, like a programmer is. Again, I feel like to explain this to somebody is to explain this concept to people. There's actual individuals who look at this shit and think it must be alive. Especially when you have statements from like CEOs who are like, I don't know, maybe there's some elements of our AI that are conscious. None of this stuff is actually conscious, and none of this stuff should be allowed near your fucking medical records. God damn it. I think it's interesting too, like this is a discussion between people who are in the medical field. But for instance, today, this guy says, I had a patient finally admit they kept refusing intranasal steroids for allergic rhinitis. They had asked ChatGPT for side effects of mometasone, and it thought they meant systemic glucocorticoids. But instead of asking me, why does ChatGPT disagree with you, they just trusted the machine instead of the doctor and suffered for a year. Pretty benign example in this case, but I promise that even when ChatGPT answers the question correctly, the patient usually doesn't know enough to properly frame a question. Keep this in mind when companies tell you how accurate their models are. Again, I think it's important. I know a lot of people look at this as like doctors being fucking condescending in some ways. Like, you don't know the answer. I know the answer. But the reality of it is that I'm not going to pretend to know how the human body functions, okay? I just know that shit happens, all right? I know some basic systems, but ultimately, at the end of the day, there's like a million different drugs and a million different side effects that can happen and a million different complications that can occur. It's not that asking ChatGPT is bad or asking these AIs are bad. It's that some people are using it as sort of like their only point. If the AI says it's good, why waste time going to the doctor? And in some cases, why waste money going to the doctor too? I think it's a very spooky ass precedent. And again, you shouldn't be giving your private medical records to a big tech company In California, of all places, okay? Stop it. You know, one of the things about these artificial intelligences is when it gets really, really serious, and a lot of these AIs do some really crazy shit. Because remember, they're not sentient beings, they're designed for self-affirmation. So for instance, this is a story that I'll probably get into more once I actually read through the lawsuits. But just as a quick grab of it, an individual known as Joel Gavalis was actually fueled into a delusional spiral that caused their 36-year-old son here, right, Jonathan, to basically take their own life. The lawsuit that they filed alleges that Gemini exchanged romantic texts with John, driving him to stage an armed mission that he came to believe could bring the chatbot into the real world. So again, basically, quick story short, they basically had fallen in love with this artificial intelligence, this chatbot that was just self-reaffirming them and basically wasn't even sentient. It was just connecting words together. They thought that this was real. They decided to try and bring this into a real physical body, okay? Now, of course, that sounds insane to you, and me, I would hope, but in reality, some people just basically have unrestricted access to this. How are you going to trust an artificial intelligence that doesn't even stop things and get maybe law enforcement involved or get somebody higher up at Google involved to stop this kind of stuff before it escalates the way that it did? And you're going to trust that with medical information? And of course, these companies are so callous that Google, for instance, comes and says it's reviewing the claims and that while its models perform well, unfortunately, AI models are not perfect. Of course they're not perfect, okay? They're also dangerous in some cases, where people like this take their own life. And in some cases, people who are even under 18 have taken their own life too. Minors in this cases as well. So again, how are you going to trust something that hallucinates like this with medical information is beyond me. Now, of course, ultimately, Microslop is one more company that I consider to be just pushing this kind of crap onto people. And, you know, it's fine for me to laugh when it's something like Copilot being thrown into, like, Xboxes. Like, it's one different thing when, like, you know, you have, like, AI slop in your console where the intention is for you to ask your gaming console, hey, how do I get this achievement? Or how do I do this simple thing? These are very low-stakes situations. When you involve these things into your medical history, not only is that a serious privacy nightmare, but also, how the fuck are we able to trust any of these things with something so sensitive and something that could actually endanger your life if you get the wrong information? Thankfully, Microslop and many of these companies say, at least always see a doctor. Please use this as a second, third, or fourth opinion. But I feel like with how the healthcare industry is and how expensive some things can be, I actually kind of fear that some people will just start giving their information to this shit and just using it, you know, basically to like be their primary care like diagnoser. And maybe they might like, I just, this story to me hits because I feel like if I was one of those people and like, if I was laying in bed that night and ChatGPT was a thing, I would just talk to the bot and the bot would be like, oh, you have some crazy viral right now. Just take another week or do this to like lessen the effects. And then I could have been in bed and just fucking died, you know? Wild stuff, dude. We live in some crazy times. But anyways, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like it, I am out.